This is the 2015 Moto G. It's a third generation device, so Motorola has had plenty of time and resources to make improvements upon it. And as you might expect, at this point it's a very refined phone for a really good price. Now it's important to clarify something. This is the 16GB option with 2 gigs of RAM, which comes in at $220. There's also an 8GB version with 1 gig of RAM for $180, but I would recommend getting the upgraded version. Even at $220, that's still a really good deal. Most of the other phones I do content on are way upwards of $400, but that also brings into question, what do those phones do that the Moto G doesn't? The answer is not that much. Motorola strategically achieved that low price point by cutting back just a little bit in a bunch of areas, and that's a much better solution than cutting back a lot in 1 or 2 areas. It's much less noticeable and it's just better overall. And before I get into the drawbacks that the phone does have, I want to first mention that the Moto G has a lot of flagship features despite its very affordable price. It's running nearly stock Android, has expandable storage, supports LTE, is IPX7 certified, meaning it's water resistant up to 1 meter, has a vastly improved camera, amazing battery life, and a ton of customization options in Moto Maker. But I'm keeping this video focused on how the Moto G achieved that low price, so just keep those awesome features in mind as I talk about the things that aren't top-notch about this phone. Taking a look at the specs, the Moto G really isn't that bad. It's rocking a Snapdragon 410 CPU, which while it may be dated, it's still plenty capable. It's also got 2 gigs of RAM, a 2470 mAh battery, a 13 megapixel camera, and a 5-inch 1280 by 720p IPS display. That's actually a solid set of specs. The 2 areas I see being problems are the CPU and the display. Starting with the CPU, personally I don't subscribe to the belief that every phone needs the latest and greatest CPU. I like to think I'm a man of practicality, so if it works, then it works. And that's exactly what the 410 does in the Moto G. It's enough to handle day-to-day use, and that's good enough for me. Moving on to the other really big compromise, the display. Obviously 720p is not as sharp as other phones on the market, but it's really only a problem when you transfer from a different phone to the Moto G. When using the Moto G as a daily driver, I got used to the 720p screen and really didn't care. The initial switch made it seem bad, but after a week I wasn't thinking about resolution at all. In this day and age, people probably think 720p is the worst thing ever, but I promise you, if you use it for a few days as a daily driver, you won't care at all and you'll see it's more than acceptable. Those are the biggest drawbacks on the Moto G. The other ones you have to just dig a little bit deeper into the user experience. And next up is the build quality. The frame and removable back are both plastic, but they're not that bad of a plastic. The frame looks really nice, but just feels like plastic. And the back has a nice grippy texture, but especially compared to the Moto X, it feels really cheap. I'm sure that the cheaper material helped Motorola cut costs with this phone, and I'm sure that's worth it for most people, but if you're like me, I like to hold a phone and I like it to feel premium in my hand, and this just doesn't do that. The last really noticeable area where they cut costs on is the speakers. It may look like there are dual front-facing speakers, but no. Only the bottom speaker actually pumps out sound. And on that topic, the sound is mediocre. Not horrible, not great, but it is obvious that they saved some money by only implementing speaker functionality in that bottom grille. To sum it up, you're saving hundreds of dollars, and what you're getting is a slightly slower CPU, a slightly lower resolution screen, a slightly lower build quality, and a slightly worse speaker quality. I think the pros far outweigh the cons of this Moto G, but keep in mind if you're getting the cheaper $180 model, there's going to be a couple more cons, and it'll be a little bit slower. But either way, I think the Moto G is a great buy. Thank you for watching, subscribe to see more content, and as always, stay classy.